You are listening to Meet the Thriller Author, the podcast where I interview writers of mysteries, thrillers, and suspense books. I am your host, Alan Peterson, and this is episode number 172. In this episode of the podcast, we'll be meeting Taylor Moore, who is a former CIA intelligence officer who worked in both analysis and operations. He later consulted for the Department of Defense and now lives in the Texas Panhandle with his family. Downrange is Taylor's debut novel and the first of a series featuring DEA agent Garrett Cole. A reminder to rate and review this podcast on your favorite podcasting app. You can visit thrillingreads.com/links to sign up to the Thrilling Reads mailing list so you can get great deals on thriller and mystery books. You'll also find all my website and social media links over there at thrillingreads.com/links. All right, here is my interview with Taylor Moore. Excited to talk to Taylor. Welcome to the podcast.
Man, thanks for having me on, Alan. It's an honor to be on your show, and I appreciate you having me.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. And so, wow, your debut novel coming up, I believe it's in a couple of weeks, huh?
August 3rd. So it's just right around the corner. Actually.
Oh, next week. Yeah. Recording this July 30th. So congrats. How's the whole, this is your first book. So how's the whole book launch stuff going for you? Is it how you imagined it?
It's not really. It's a lot. There's a lot more to it. I was used to that sort of quiet writer's life where I just sat in my little coffee shop or in my office and just had this sort of solitary life. And now everything has become very public, as you're starting to, as we're going through this process of getting the book out there. And so, no, that was a little bit surprising for me, but at the same time, it's fun. It's, the book is my baby. I'm ready to get it out there. I'm excited about it. So I enjoy talking about it, but no, it's different from the solitary writer's life that I was used to.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. You're like you said, you're kind of like in your writing cave, and then all of a sudden you're like dragged out, exposed to the whole world.
It really is. It's a strange kind of surreal experience, but it's fun because your friends and family are really excited, and I'm excited, and I have small kids, and they're can't wait to see it come out, and just all the hoopla that goes along with it. But no, it's been fun. It's actually been fun. But yeah, it's very different than what I'm used to.
Well, I want to say that I received an advanced copy from your publisher, and I've been enjoying Downrange. A lot of great action. I really like Garrett Cole is a badass. So we'll get into that in a little bit here. But I really enjoy that book, so I highly recommend the listeners to go and check that out. You won't be disappointed. But you have such an amazing background. So can you tell us a little bit about your time in the CIA? Not sure what you can tell us. Or other work you've done before becoming a writer.
Yeah, no, actually. So it's a funny thing because probably every bit of me is in this book, from childhood, growing up on a farm and ranch, northwest of Houston, up and through to my experiences working with the CIA. And working with the military, doing a lot of stuff, but part of which was counter narcotics, which played into that. And then later on, I ended up working in oil and gas on the Texas High Plains, where the book is set. And I was working out on all these big ranches, and starting to hear these stories about things that were going on. And so, just the writer in me, naturally, as I'm going through every part of my life, I'm pulling this in to my brain, and it just kind of sticks there and kind of rummages around a little bit, and stories start to come out. And so Downrange is really a culmination of a whole lifetime worth of experience. And again, people will see once they get in there, and I think they'll see the authenticity of a person who's been there and done that and kind of seen it with his own eyes. And so it was fun to get, to take those things and put them on pages, and to hear people like you, appreciate your kind words about the book. And I'm glad people are enjoying it.
Yeah, I think that's been so great in the last few years. It seems like a lot of people with backgrounds like yours, or people who were in the military, are actually now writing these thrillers. Makes it so much more authentic than not to downplay anyone else, but you can tell when something's just been researched to death versus someone who's lived it.
Yeah.
So did you always want to write fiction even before you? How long have you been wanting to be a writer?
So, it's hard to say. I've always been a storyteller. I've always had a wild imagination. I've always liked that thing, even from childhood. But I wrote my first book actually about 20 years ago, believe it or not. And it was when I was working on a ranch with my dad. And I just had my laptop, and over the course of a few months, I just wanted to see if I could write a book. And, some people say I just want to run a marathon just to see if I can do it. And it was kind of like that experience for me. I didn't think I would do this for a living. I just liked the idea of it. And so I did. I wrote a young adult novel, and it just kind of sat on my computer, and I don't even know if it still exists or where it is, but hopefully it's around somewhere just for fun. But yeah, so I always kind of had that passion to do it. And then, after I was doing that, I ended up working at the agency and, doing the military stuff. And every now and then I'd kind of take a stab at something, but I was just so busy and so much was going on. I was doing so much writing at work that it just wasn't fun for me to kind of get into that writing process, because I'd write so much at work, and it was just hard to do when you get home. But then later on, when I was working in the oil and gas stuff, it was kind of I was using a different part of my brain. And I was encouraged to get back into writing by a writer here. I was actually what they call a landman. So I was out there meeting with these big ranchers, and we were making oil and gas deals and deciding where to put oil wells and all that. And I ended up on the property of this big ranch, this guy named John R. Erickson, who wrote a series called Hank the Cow Dog, and he still is writing them. And so I kind of said, yeah, I'm a writer too. And he's like, well, what are you writing? I said, nothing. He goes, well, it doesn't sound like you're much of a writer then if you're not doing anything. I was like, well, okay, you're right. I'm not doing it. So I would take my laptop with me everywhere I'd go. And if I had a little downtime waiting for a meeting, if I had a lunch break, I would write every chance I got. And so that's kind of how I got back into it.
And is that when you started getting back into it, is that what it eventually became the Garrett Cole character or Don Range, or is that something else?
Not at all. That's the funny thing, is that when I was writing just for fun, just to kind of get back into it, I was writing another young adult novel. And it wasn't until I really decided to start, when my wife and I, kind of made this decision, like, do you really want to try your hand at this? You like it, you're passionate about it. And I decided I wanted to do it. And I said, well, I better do something I make sure that I can sell. And, obviously having that background that I had lent itself to, like, as you said, there's a lot of people, the Brad Taylors and the Jack Carrs and the Don Bentleys out there that have kind of been there, done that, and are writing about it. And so, I had that experience that I could pull into a novel series. And so that's when I kind of changed what I was doing and started really Garrett Cole. So this is kind of an interesting story. Garrett Cole was not my protagonist when I started out. And I actually got my agent with another protagonist in another series. And Garrett Cole was a side character in that book. He was just a secondary character. And my agent really loved that guy. And he said, man, there's something to that guy. And it was kind of funny because I always sort of deep down, I kind of felt like he was stealing the show. And I was kind of waiting for people, beta readers to kind of say that. And a couple actually did. But my agent was really the one who kind of noticed that. And he's like, why don't we redo this with another series? And he threw that idea out there. And of course, that's what every writer wants to hear, is let's throw away this book you've rewritten 5 times and start from scratch, And so my agent's a wonderful guy, and it's I always joke that I threw myself on the floor and threw a tantrum, and he gave me enough time to get back up, pull myself together, and have the conversation to continue. But we did, and he was nice. And he said, "Well, just think about it, And so I think I woke up at like 3:00 the next morning, couldn't sleep, thinking about this, and I said, "Well, let me try to write something with Garrett Cole." And so I wrote the first chapter, which appears about 50 pages into the finished book. And it was like the best writing I'd ever done. It just came so naturally. Garrett came out naturally. And Garrett was he was born before that, but that's when he really became alive, when he became my protagonist. And so that's how he came about.
Oh, wow. That's really cool how that process works. Yeah. Frustrating and
it
for
didn't
you.
feel very cool at the time, I'll tell you. But I'm glad now. My agent, like I said, he was right about it. And that was a good call. But yeah, at the time it was like, really, I'm going to, how many more months,
Yeah, I can just imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us a little bit about like for people who are just are discovering you, how do you describe your books to them?
It's it's a weird book in some ways, because it's almost like an operator style thriller mixed with a modern day Western.
Mm-hmm.
And there might be something out there like that. If there is, I haven't really seen it. But I think my big influences in life, growing up, just given my age, probably, are Tom Clancy and then Larry McMurtry. Those were the two writers that I really gravitated toward, growing up. And so I like that sort of that Clancy-esque, intrigue and fun storylines. And, the Jack Ryan character is so good because he's a guy you feel for. He's not a superhero. He's very capable, but he's not who we think. And he's a very real person, I think, to us, and that we could all sort of gravitate to. And I wanted a character like that. And even though, Garrett was a Green Beret and DEA and does some kind of over the top kind of cool things that we don't all do, I think, if you've read it, you kind of know he's still a believable character. He's still in many ways just a normal guy and doing sort of an extraordinary type job. And so I wanted that. And then again with Larry McMurtry, having that influence, I just love McMurtry's descriptions of settings. I loved his dialogue. I love the humor he added in, and that was just an influence. And I wanted to write like that. And so for people maybe who like McMurtry or like Clancy, I say, imagine if you tried to put a book together like that. I'm not saying I reached that level of greatness that those guys achieved as authors, but that's what I was going for.
Yeah, it's got like a Justified military thriller combo vibe. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, Justified. Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, like a Justified, because it's got, and I wanted to do that level of world building. I'm a big CJ Box fan, and so I wanted to do kind of what CJ Box does for Wyoming, and it's this level of world building, and it's a world that exists, but it doesn't exist for me. I've never been to Wyoming, but he has all these characters that come into play, and it's just the setting and what it's like there. And I wanted to do for the Texas High Plains, what he or Craig Johnson, what those guys are doing for the regions that they write about.
And so can you tell us a little bit about the plot of Downrange for the listeners?
Absolutely. So Downrange, it starts out, believe it or not, although it's set on the Texas High Plains, starts out in Afghanistan. And basically our protagonist, Garrett Cole, and I'll try to kind of breeze over this so I'm not giving away any spoilers. But yeah, so basically he's out there doing a job. He's doing his mission, which is, related to opium trafficking. And he's on a task force. And basically he comes across something that he should have never seen because he's in a place that he shouldn't have been. Ends up getting into a situation, a firefight, and rescues this boy that he ends up sort of responsible for. And that's sort of the very beginning. It doesn't give too much away, but ends up kind of on this protective custody assignment. And it just has to keep the kid out of sight for a while, which sounds easy enough. He'll go back to his big, ranch back in Texas, sort of hide out, camp out a little bit till things cool off and simmer down. But he kind of goes out of the frying pan and into the oven because he gets home he kind of needed to mend fences with his estranged family anyhow. And things go sort of from bad to worse when he finds out they've gotten into some trouble of their own. And I'll kind of leave it at that and let people who want to read kind of find out what happens.
Yeah. And you said this is the first in a series. So do you have is the second one already underway or?
It's in my editor's hands right now. I'm eagerly awaiting his feedback, as any author does. But so my agent's read it and he's really excited about it. And I kind of tell people, if you like Downrange, you're gonna love the second book because it follows those same characters. And I've been telling people, pay close attention to the characters that don't seem important in Downrange because they may pop up again and they may pop up in a big way. And so I think it's going to be fun. And I'm going to continue to do that throughout the series, is introduce new characters, and you may see them for a brief minute in that book, but maybe book 3, book 4, book 5, they come back into play. And so I think I want to create a really fun series that people will just want to follow because I tried to write a character-driven thriller, so it's not just about them, my protagonist against the bad guys. He's dealing with all sorts of things. And if you think about Downrange, it's dealing with, it's a book about family. It's a book about, relationships, and, there's hard feelings, and it's about forgiveness, and old high school crushes come back into play, and bullies, and all these things that, everybody deals with in everyday life. They're in the book. And I wanted to make a book that was relatable for everyone. And it's fun to read about, terrorists trying to kill you, or being hunted by, cartel assassins or something like that. It's not very, thankfully, it's not very relatable to most people, but it is fun to read about. But I wanted to have relatable problems to our protagonist, and the other characters. I go through, I don't just follow him in first person. The book's written in third person. But I get into multiple points of view, and I wanted people to be as involved in every other character's life as they are with the protagonist. And that's sort of my goal throughout the series.
Yeah, I think that's so important too, because characters is kind of keeps us going. Because the action is great, but if it's all just that, gotta get
right.
Yeah, so that's awesome that you to accomplish that. And I was wondering too, since this is your first book, and you kind of just got, well, not kind of, because I know everything takes forever in the publishing world, but what was the process like then? Like, you went out and looked for an agent, and you had to go through all that. What was all that process like? Was it a kind of a nightmare?
Yeah. Of course, I always tell people it's the same miserable process that every writer goes through. I'm sure somebody didn't have that process, but I think most people go through the query process and get the 8 billion rejections, and you sit around and go, "Why am I doing this? I'm no good. I'm terrible," and. But yeah, so I mean, gosh, this is a process of, I think, 4 years or so, from sort of start to finish, maybe a little bit longer, depending on how you look at it. But yeah, so honestly, my agent, John Talbot, he's phenomenal. And I got him, he actually rejected me the first time I sent my first manuscript to him. And when I sent out my first round of queries, I actually had 3, pretty, prominent agents that anybody would be very happy with that requested full manuscript, and so I've been told that's a pretty good thing. And I'm I think having the background, CIA experience, that probably opened a few doors, at least kind of got your toe in, and then you include a writing sample and all that, so at least got your toe in there. But John was actually the first one to get back to me. And he basically said, I like your story, I like your writing, but here are the 15 things you did wrong. Wow. And and so and the thing was, it wasn't, sometimes people say like, well, just because somebody tells you something, it wasn't just because he told me that. He was dead on. He's a good editor, and I saw it was just spot on. I was like, yep, you're right about everything. And so I went to those other 2 agents and I pulled the manuscript from them. And a lot of people say, you were crazy for doing that. Why did you do that? Because what if they would have accepted it? And I was just like, the book wasn't ready. It wasn't ready. This other guy, John Talbot, was right about it. And, I wanted, this is what I wanted to do for a living. And I wanted it to be right. And I wanted it to be perfect. And it wasn't. So I went ahead and pulled it, and then resubmitted again. And I didn't expect John to accept it. One of my writer friends told me one time, they said, you sent it back to him, they're like, that's the cardinal sin of writing. You never resend to an agent unless he asks for it. I was like, well, okay, fine. I didn't know. I was like, what I mean? Like, if the worst thing that happens to this guy today is that somebody spent months redoing a novel over, based on his word, and resent it, then fine, but I did. And fortunately he saw it, liked it, and it brought me on as a client. And then it was a long process of, going back, me rewriting that thing. And then again, back to the story of him saying, nope, let's start from scratch. And I'm not the only author that's done that. There's a few out there, and I won't tell their stories. I'll let them do it. But that happens, So I kind of say that to writers who are out there who get that attitude. I'm going to put my heels into the ground, and you're not going to budge me from it. You might do that. It might be the right thing, but it might not, and in this case, I'm thankful that it did take us long, and it took multiple drafts and multiple rewrites. And then, to the point where I finally got it to my editor, David Highfield was an incredible editor, and William Morrow, got it to them. And then it was I guess that was over a year ago. So, by the time you get through that process of him getting what he wants, and, and getting those revisions into the story and edits, it took over a year. So it's not a quick process by any stretch of the imagination. And so that's why now, when a pub date's rolling around August 3rd, it's not like, oh, that's kind of neat. It's like, no, this is like the Olympics. It took me 4 years to get here.
Overnight success, right?
Yeah, and so I'm going to be a speaker at an event, and it said how Taylor became an overnight success, sort of tongue in cheek or whatever. And the idea is for me to tell the story, and I'll do it kind of like what I told you, but in a more elaborate way for writers that are interested in this, and and kind of say, like, here's what you need to do. Here's if you want to be a published author, particularly with one of the bigger houses, then here's the road, and it's not an easy one, but you just gotta be determined.
Yeah, if it was easy, I guess everybody would be doing it, right? Because
Yeah. My wife used to tell me that all the time because I mean, this was hard. This was a hard process, and I would need pep talks sometimes. And that was exactly what she said. She said, like, if this was easy, Barnes and Noble looks pretty big, but it's really not if you think about it. If you look around the books in there, if you go to the thriller section, it's not that big, I mean, and if you want to be one of those books that are next to the Brad Taylors or the Mark Greaneys or the Don Bentleys or the CJ Boxers, or name any of those guys, then it takes a lot. It takes everything in you to get there.
Speak at a conference. Which conference is that? Is that this year?
Oh, this will be just a local one in Amarillo.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
It's going to be the
Cool.
High Plains Writers group, and so no, it'll be a local one. And
yeah, I've never been, but I've heard really good things about ButcherCon, so it's on my list. It's kind of nice to see them coming back now after the whole pandemic. Well, we're still in it, but I mean,
yeah,
the fact that they're actually trying to hold events is kind of cool. So.
It is. Well, and I'll be honest, because Thriller Fest, I went to Thriller Fest twice, and I even give it and the acknowledgments in my book to the Thriller Fest and the people that put it on. If you're out there and you're writing thrillers and you haven't been, you just got to go. It's just not a nice to do. It's a have to do. And it's so good. There's so many great panels, so many great speakers. I've learned so much. The level of networking that you do at events like that, it's just, I can't put it. I mean, I can't even put it into words, like how important it is and what a great event it is. So, it's been virtual 2 years in a row for obvious reasons, but hopefully next year it'll get back online, and I think that'd be really fun. So no, you're right. Like, it's just fun having BoucherCon and being able to, writers like to be with each other, because again, we have these sort of solitary lives in a way, and there's nothing like being with other writers when you're doing it, because they know the joy, the pain, everything that goes along with it.
It's such a great community too, because even though you're, technically all competitors, everyone's so helpful, like all the authors in the same genres and stuff. It's kind of great to see that.
It's strange. I mean, everybody should be not as nice as they are. Yeah. I don't know why that is. I mean, yeah, because the guys that I guess in theory I will be a competitor with, if you want to look at it that way. I mean, if you're in there looking at two different books, you're going to buy one. It might be mine or it might be someone else's. But everybody that I've encountered has been nothing but helpful, nothing but friendly, nothing but like trying to get me to the next level. And I don't know if it's like that for every genre. I can only speak to the sort of thriller and, sort of more military writer type guys. But everybody's been just bar none friendly and helpful as they could be.
I'm kind of curious now too about your writing process. Then do you outline these before you start to write it, or what does that look like?
Man, it's funny you should say that. Everybody asks, and I always say, I mean to do that. I'm going to do that on the next book. I kind of do, like, I kind of have, I think right now I have like maybe 5 or 6 in the series, sort of like, a few paragraphs of like, here's where the story's going to go type of a deal. And, that's something I sent to my editor. And so I have in my mind where it's going to go and where I want it to go. When I start doing a book though, I actually it's more of a concept. Like, I'll read about something really cool and I'll be like, man, imagine that in a book. Imagine that playing out in a story. And so for me, my book is sort of like military thriller meets Wild West, and I like both those things. I thought, man, imagine like getting a guy with an AR-15 on a horseback and he's flying across the plains, like killing bad guys. I mean, to me, it just seemed fun. He's got the, Shema scarf, around. I mean, so he's kind of half military operator, half Wild West cowboy with his cowboy hat. I mean, to me, it just sounded cool. And so I was like, okay, build a story around that. And so book 2, I won't give it any away, but I think there's some really, really cool, again, concepts, because I'm always reading, see what's in the news, and I'm like, imagine if this guy went up to this guy. So it's kind of like MMA, right? I'm like, what if, I'll take your kung fu against your, judo or whatever, and let's see who comes out on top. And so I kind of like to, pair these people and kind of see what happens if you put them in a fight.
Yeah, I think that's cool you mentioned that, because I remember a few years ago I saw, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 10 years ago, I can't remember, but it was a picture in Afghanistan of the special forces guys, and they're they're in the horse, they're in horses, and the Taliban guys were in horses, and it's like, holy moly, that's like,
Yeah,
but they all with the modern weapons, of course. But it was like,
yeah.
wow, that's how I guess the best way to get around over there was on horseback.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, is there anything cooler than that? And to me, just as a concept, that's cool that you can have all this like really I mean, the technology that we have within the US military and intelligence world is just insane, but yet they're on horseback and they're living in caves and sleeping in caves. And again, that's just one of those things that I sort of geek out on as a writer because I think it's cool. I think it's interesting. And I like the fact that, there's something they could have been doing 1,000 years ago, they're doing now. And it's just really neat.
And what do you use to write? Do you use like Word or something else? Or?
Yeah, just use Word. So
Yeah.
the good old Word document. And again, like, you ask that and people say like, you should be using whatever. And I'm like, oh yeah, I mean to do that. I mean to do that. But I don't know. I guess if the process works, it works. Right. So maybe
Yeah,
I won't
absolutely.
mess with
Yeah.
anything, but maybe there's the greatest thing in the world out there and I'm not using it. And I should be. I don't know.
Well, I've interviewed over 160 thriller authors so far, and I think like probably 90% use Word. So
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it must.
There's something to the basics, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, exactly. Was it no need to reinvent the wheel, especially if it's working for you?
Yeah.
uh,
So that's all I do.
yeah. And what's when you're writing a project? Do you have like do you try to do like I'm going to write from this time to this time, or when I hit these many words, what's that look like?
So I never used to do that until recently, and I was on a real tight deadline to get book two in. So I did sort of give myself a word count, and I never thought I would do that. I always thought that was a strange thing that authors do, but yet here I am doing it. So I guess the process is sort of ever evolving. Yeah, usually I just write until I didn't feel like writing anymore. But I think because again I was on a deadline, I kind of knew how many words I needed to write to get to where I needed to be. So it just was a way for me to kind of calm myself down a little bit and be like, well, if you just did, this many words a day, then you'll meet your deadline. And that was sort of easy enough to do, if you know what I mean. And so I don't normally do that. I probably won't do that when I start back writing book three, but no, it is kind of a good way to do it because then there's a sense of satisfaction if you say like, maybe I will do that. You're talking me into it now. Because yeah, then you say like, we write about 100,000 words or whatever. And okay, well, like, here's between now and deadline, here's where we are. Then let's do this. So, no, I like that idea. Thanks for the tip.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. And so you're right now I'm sure you're so busy with the launch and talking to people like me, but
Yeah.
when are you going to sit down and start writing the third one? Is that coming up soon?
I want to do that because I waited too long for book two, I didn't do that on purpose because we were still editing book one, and kind of until you get to the end of that book, you didn't really know. I didn't know how to like start because my editor may want to change things. But I think now, I sort of know him, he sort of knows me, and maybe we'll have a little conversation of here's where I want to go, and then so it won't kind of, I can get started on a little bit sooner. And again, hopefully I'll have, edits back from him on book two and we'll start working down that and down that path. And so, yeah, so hopefully that'll start pretty soon. But yeah, you're right on this, the publicity and marketing stuff. Again, once I finished book two, I took this big like sigh of relief and then only to like Garrett Cole, go from the frying pan and into the oven. And I didn't realize how much this takes, and it takes, I mean, it's an all day long, full on into the night process doing the marketing publicity. And that's fine. Again, it's just part of it, but it was something I hadn't expected. And, but no, it's part of the job.
Yeah, I really think I hear that a lot about writers about, I aspiring writers, I just want to write. I'm like, well, yeah, that's not, even Stephen King goes out and does full junkets for his new books. I mean, so it's a big part of the business side of it.
Yeah, I'm sure there was an era where, maybe Ernest Hemingway or something like, he just sat in his thing, turned it in, and it becomes a book. Well, I'm just, again, for any aspiring writers out there, just so you know, that's not the case. And if you don't really like doing this kind of thing, man, it's going to be hard, if you, I mean, because you got to be kind of out there selling your wares, as they say, and my wares are books. So it's just part of it. But I mean, I like I said, I like it. I like talking to people, and I love talk about writing. I'll talk about writing all day long because it's my passion. And then, of course, like I said, the book's my baby, so I'm happy to talk about that.
And so before I let you go, I always like to close things out by asking, because I do have aspiring writers listening to this podcast. What advice do you have for them?
You know, there's a lot of advice, but I tell you the one, I've mentioned this the other day, and I maybe mentioned it a couple of times to people, but I think it's good. If you're really aspiring writer and you really think maybe I want to do this for a living, then don't just start a book, start and finish a book. And I didn't realize what a big deal that was until later on. People go, "Oh, you finished the book?" And I said, "Yeah, of course. I mean, you're going to start a book, you got to finish it." And they're like, "Most people don't ever do that. You know, it's rare for people to finish a book." And I thought about it. I was like, "Well, now I know why, because I've written several at this point." And so it's fun to write three-quarters of a book and make all these problems and make all this like misery for your protagonist. The real, like, where the rubber meets the road is making it all come back together again. That's where I always go like, why did I do this? Why, why did I make so many problems? And so I would tell people, it's kind of like, if you're going to start it, finish it. Now, if you just love writing and it's just your release and you don't really plan on do it, start 1,000,000 books. Who cares? If you just have fun writing, just do that. But if you really think you might want to do this, and I don't care if it's self-publishing, traditional, whatever it is, start and finish a book and say, I'm not starting another project till I finish this thing.
I think that's great advice. And I really like what you mentioned earlier too, is, I mean, and you have to be able to be tough. Like you said, you had to basically put a whole book you already wrote aside and start fresh for this one. So
yeah,
you got to roll with the punches.
You got to roll with the punches, and it's just it's hard work. I mean, it's the hardest work. I mean, you've seen my background. This is by far the hardest work I've ever done. This is by far the most time-consuming work I've ever done. And I mean, getting that book in, I think for 7 months, I worked 7 days a week to get that thing in. And I have small kids, and so I'm trying to be a good dad and a good husband and a good writer. And it takes a lot of time. So I'm not complaining, but anybody who says you can just kind of like phone it in, that's not the case. not the case at all.
All right. And so where can the listeners find you? What's your website?
Yeah, so I just have a new website. So taylormorebooks.com. So go on there and check it out. And I've got links to buy the book if you don't have a local store or whatever you like to go to. So yeah, taylormorebooks.com, and you can find me. You can find more about me, and you can see I post a lot of pictures of me kind of doing some of the training. For everything I do, I try to, write about, I try to do. So whether it's, some of it I've done and kind of grew up with, shooting guns and riding horses and all those. So things I knew, but if you go on the site, you'll see, me sort of doing some of the research for that. And and then a little bit more about my background, and, I have a newsletter and all that. So if anybody's interested, go check out, taylormore.com or taylormorebooks.com.
Yeah, that'd be cool to see you in research mode. So yeah, definitely go check that out.
Yeah.
And so Downrange comes out August 3rd. By the time people are listening to this, it'll be out. So go check it out. But all right, Taylor, well, thank you so much for being on the show. Really enjoyed talking with you.
And enjoyed talking with you too, Alan. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for listening to Meet the Thriller Author. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with one of your favorite writers of mysteries and thrillers. Or if this episode's guest is new to you, I hope you give their books a chance. Helping listeners discover new authors and books is one of the coolest outcomes of doing this podcast. As always, you can head over to thrillerauthors.com to sign up to my Thrilling Reads email list. That way you won't miss out on any great deals in thriller and mystery books. You can also check out all the links and resources in the show notes for this episode over at thrillerauthors.com. And also please do subscribe to this podcast if you haven't done so already, and leave a rating and review wherever it is that you're listening to this show. If you have done that already, I thank you. I really do appreciate your support. For my other links to my author website, social media haunts, and more, check out thrillingreads.com/links. All my links will be on that page. So that's it for this episode. See you next time, and stay safe out there.